Hello guys, and welcome back to this very special Kiev Cultural Changemaker special. I'm of course your host and founder of the Interpreting Wine podcast, Lawrence Francis. And while I'm based in London, travelling and uncovering great new places is really part of who I am. And one of my biggest discoveries of the last year has been the city of Kiev, capital of Ukraine. This series of 9 interviews was recorded in October 2018 and in March 2019, and I hope captures a sense of not only what's happening in the food and drink scene, touching as it does on wine and local cuisine, but also captures a sense of where the city is heading through design, music and cultural change. And I hope that if you or anybody you know is planning to visit to the city, you'll use this series as an audio guide, both to discover fantastic places to eat and drink, and also understand some of the wider cultural context. So here we go, today's episode of the Kiev Cultural Changemaker Special. Today's episode of the podcast features restaurant entrepreneur Dmytro Borysov. He presides over the Gastrofamily chain of restaurants that have between them changed the way that Ukrainians eat in Kiev. We hear his origin story and how he got his start in the restaurant business. He gives us a virtual tour of his very first restaurant, Barsuk. We get an insight into the Ukrainian reception to this restaurant. We hear about his very latest restaurant in the group. And he looks ahead to future international expansion. Enjoy!
Would be a little bit hard to put it into 2-3 minutes, as I've been doing this for about 9 years. I would call it not a business, but more of a gastro development of a culture here in Kiev and in Ukraine. I've started it in 2009 as a small kind of personalized restaurant. It was an embodiment of my dream to basically just cook, stand in an open kitchen, see the people, talk to them, and host them in my own place. My love to cooking basically developed thanks to my grandmother, who used to take me around to our dacha, which is a typical Ukrainian country house, very close to the city, basically designed to provide fresh produce to citizens. And from about 12 years old, I was watching her, was helping there. It was so normal for me that it was basically a normal lifestyle for me. And then it turned into a hobby. And it was with me through the years in marketing and advertising. That's what I was doing first. And then I've decided that it's time to take my hobby and turn it into a business. So just like any transition, it was sparked by 2008 financial crisis. And at that time, you realize that intellectual labor and business that you've been building for doesn't matter how many years is not something you can rely on. And in a all the time changing political and economical situation, the only thing you can be sure of is about your actual skills as a craftsman, or skills like baking, cooking, and something that you can always carry with you, something that you can always apply whenever you are, and something that will always feed you and give you an opportunity to work and profit.
One of the things that's really interesting for me now is that I know that you have, essentially a restaurant empire. There's lots of interests within Ukraine. There's interests outside of Ukraine. There's a franchising model in operation. And I think, but to really understand where that's all come from, let's go back to the very first restaurant, Barsuk. So could you just almost take us back to 2009, take us back into what were some of the things that were in your mind and your wishes at that time, and how that was then received by the people here in Kiev?
So, as a person who didn't have any experience in running a restaurant, all my experience was based on basically loving food, eating out a lot, cooking a lot at home, and the first year of business was basically a trial and error process where when I realized that it doesn't just involve cooking, I was doing everything basically, front of house, back of house, management. I was cooking, hosting the guests. I was going to the market, was buying the produce. The menu was basically designed by me, and so was all the front of house work. And I just poured my soul into it, and in a way it worked out. And then I've kind of found my ground. I was lucky that from the beginning the restaurant was quite well received by the audience, as we opened in a city where there was no other format like that, where the city was filled with quite posh, luxurious places where people would be scared to go and eat. And I've opened something that was very approachable, something that was created by me personally, and people understood it. And almost from the beginning I had queues, people were standing in a queue to have lunch. It was very inspiring for me as an owner who literally poured my soul into it, who worked every single aspect of this restaurant by myself, including cooking and management. Well, there were times where I had a bit of a negative feedback because of my background in marketing, and people were saying, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing, he's not a cook, this is all just marketing. But it wasn't very essential. A lot of people who came and who have eaten there, they were quite amazed and saying, oh my God, this is what we've been waiting for. Finally, there was a restaurant that was about food and not about aesthetics or showing off how much money you've got.
Well, sitting here as we are in March 2019, I want to do a fast forward and bring us right up to date. So I understand the most recent of your openings here in Kiev is a restaurant called Philadelphia. So I won't ask too much in-depth of a question, just get you to elaborate on the concept, and you'll do a bit of a compare and contrast through telling that story between that and the very first restaurant.
It's a little bit symbolic that after 9 years of business and trying out all the formats, my last restaurant is actually very similar to my first restaurant. It is small, it is casual dining, it's even a little bit more casual than the first, as it's mostly focused on takeaway. So basically, as the name suggests, it is connected to sushi, but we are being very honest in naming a restaurant like that, because Philadelphia sushi doesn't have anything in common with actual Japanese sushi. It was created in Nobu for an American market, and it is an updated version of Japanese food for fast and casual consumer in a big city, and that's what the concept is. Basically, everything is prepared freshly on the premises. As a busy city dweller, you would just go in, wait maximum 3 minutes, receive great, fresh, high-quality produce. I felt that's exactly what the city was missing, and so I decided to bring it to life.
I'm kind of surprised and kind of glad as well, in a way, that the first restaurant is similar to the last restaurant. I think it's always interesting when I go out to speak to people. I'm often looking for changes and evolutions, and I don't know, there's something just a bit comforting in that. Having done all of these things and opened up all of these restaurants, you've actually kind of come back to where you started. It feels like a sort of a natural point to finish our conversation today. that being said, I would imagine that you've got lots of ideas and plans about the future. You know, where does this move forward in the coming years? So I just wonder if, again, sitting here in March 2019, just share some of your thoughts with us at this time.
План отличается от мечты.
I'd rather call things to come a dream, as plans are usually restricted by timings and budgets. And the dream at the moment is to make Ukrainian gastro tradition and food known worldwide, and try and export it to some of the main food cities in the world, like London, Berlin, and New York. At the moment, we're thinking that the best thing to do this with would be our fine dining restaurant, Kanapa. But I also believe that more democratic formats like Белый налив and Mushla will have great success as well. At the moment, it is a dream, but I would do my best to make it a reality in the nearest future.
Не конкретно. Это пока мечта, поэтому планом это нельзя назвать, потому что он неизмерим.
Thank you so much, Dmytro. It was an absolute pleasure sitting down with you and hearing all about the restaurant group, especially hearing about how Ukrainians have tended to eat in the past and their feedback on your restaurant expansion. I've also got to say a huge thank you to Santa Ruditse, who you would have heard there expertly translating Dmytro's words. Of course, I've left below the website and main social media handles for Dmytro Borysov. And indeed, if you've missed it, I featured one of his restaurants, Restaurant Kanapa, in episode 312. And of course, I would love to hear from you on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. We take things back to wine in the next episode of the Kiev Cultural Change Special, episode 315, when I sit down with Roman Zakharov of natural wine importer Frank Wines. See you then.